Today, Great.com talks with Kate Van Was, who is Executive Director at American Hiking Society. If you haven't heard of them, they are a non-profit organization whose mission is to empower all to enjoy, share, and preserve the hiking experience. If you are new here, please press subscribe on YouTube or in your podcast app, because today we learn the importance of creating opportunities for all to enjoy the hiking experience. Hello, Kate, and welcome to our podcast.
Hi, Ryan. Thanks for having me.
Oh, thank you so much for being here. And I'm really interested about this conversation and to learn more about hiking and the benefits it can do to everybody who, say, participates in hiking. So, Kate, to start with, for me and anybody new here, what is American Hiking Society and what do you do?
Yeah, so we are a national, in the US, a national 501c3 nonprofit. That means we are a nonpartisan nonprofit. That's what the C3 means. And we've been around since 1976, as have I. So kind of fate that I ended up here. You already said what our mission is. So we try to accomplish that mission through kind of two main means. So one is advocacy, and we can talk a little bit more about what that means, but that generally means activating anybody who loves to be out on the trail, activating the hiking community, which is a very broad and very big 56 million plus community in the US, activating them to reach out to the Hill, to their senators and representatives to make sure that trails and natural spaces are protected and preserved, but also to make sure that the trail and those outdoor spaces are equitable and inclusive and welcoming for all identities. And then we also do trail service work via many, many volunteers to the tunes of multi-millions dollars worth of volunteer work every year. And that's all in giving back to the trail. So helping to maintain and repair and build trails, because they don't build themselves, which is not something that all hikers realize when they're out there using the trail.
Okay, thank you so much for sharing that with us. So I would like to ask you then, why would you say hiking is so important and what you guys do as well? Why is that so important?
Yeah, I think, and it's beyond hiking. It's kind of, there are many ways to use the trail, right? Obviously. And so when we have, say, National Trails Day every year, so that is promoted and organized by American Hiking Society. We launched it with REI back in the 90s. So it's been going on for a while. It's the first Saturday of every June every year. And last year it reached 45 million people on social media. So National Trails Day is a big deal. And it is a day of service and advocacy for trails. And so on that day, we do, there are events, in a non-COVID year, there are events all across the country, 1,000 plus events for equestrians, for bicyclists, for runners, for hikers, for, anybody paddling on a river trail, that kind of thing. So we definitely are looking out for more than just, I guess, the straight up hiker, but obviously our main focus, the kind of center of our advocacy is always going to be around the hiking community. And one of the reasons that we think that hiking is so important is that it's it can be a very accessible way of enjoying the outdoors and being outdoors. It doesn't have to be competitive. It doesn't have to be hardcore. You don't need to do a day hike or not even a full day hike to just, go out on the weekend to the paved trail in your urban or suburban neighborhood and put on a pair of sneakers. You don't need a ton of equipment, right? So, and you can it's very meditative, right? I was actually talking for an interview with a yoga magazine yesterday and talking about the parallels between hiking and yoga, that you can go outside and just and be on the trail in the same way that in yoga, you need to be on the mat, right? And center yourself there. And that moving, meditative kind of walking along a paved or non-paved trail or a boardwalk, like behind me in the picture here, is very meditative and really can help center you. And so it doesn't have to be this like hardcore or huffing and puffing at record pace up a mountain, right? So it's accessible to a lot of people. If you put on a pair of sneakers and like to go outside, you are a hiker, believe it or not. So that's why the focus on hiking, because it reaches the most people and is a really accessible way to get outside.
Yeah, I really love what you said about there about, say, meditation, like what was hiking, because like, I know full well because I've done it myself, but so many people believe, say, meditation is sat in a dark room with a candle and a incense and doing this and humming to yourself. Like, that's not what meditation is. It can be. Yeah, it can be. But meditation can just be being happy in your own thoughts whilst walking outside in nature too, and just enjoying the experience and the surroundings. So yeah, I really love what you said about that, and we'll talk a little bit more about the benefits slightly
and
sooner.
Important to say, in a wheelchair too, right? Like there are many ways
sure.
to access the trail, and one of the things we try to fight for is to make more trails more accessible. So there are many ways to meditatively move yourself along a trail.
Oh, I love that. I absolutely love that. Yeah, and it's so true. There's so many ways, and people don't actually understand that there are so many different ways to actually just get out and be surrounded with, say, like-minded people also. So again, yeah, we're going to talk about a bit more on that soon. So what I want to ask you then, Kate, is sort of since its founding in 1976, what have been some of your greatest challenges and how have you overcome them?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I was born in 1976, so hard for me to say what the challenges were back then. Getting enough food. I don't know. I was a very hungry baby. No, I think, things have evolved a lot since then in the protection and maintenance, et cetera, of trails, right? So now we have, nationally designated national scenic and historic trails, right? We have the Appalachian Trail is the only one of those that's actually complete. A lot of the other ones have gaps, or you have to, in many places have to like walk along a busy road or whatever. So there's a lot of folks working to close those gaps, but we have these beautiful national scenic and historic trails. We have the National Recreational Trail System. There's more now because of AHS and other organizations, other partner organizations, there is more dedicated funding for trails and effort to protect, preserve, and maintain them. That doesn't mean that there's not more to do. There is always more to do. And there is a huge kind of backlog on infrastructure work in public lands all over the US that needs to happen. And so it takes a lot of volunteers working with a lot of different organizations, AHS just being one of them. But I think what we have found, that work continues, but at least there is more focus on it. There wasn't as much before, which is kind of why AHS came into existence, right? But there is still, and as we've seen, as we all know, and kind of the whole nation and really the world that was watching our news was going through a lot of racial reckoning in 2020, right? And there's been a lot of political unrest, political turmoil, et cetera. And then the pandemic and everything, right? So I think that really brought to the fore the challenges that still exist that in racism, but also other types of bigotry, right? Against LGBTQIA identities, or against disabled folks, or against certain body sizes, whatever it is, right? There's still a lot of that bigotry and microaggressions to actual aggressions that are occurring in the outdoors. And a lot of people like to say, well, the outdoors doesn't care who you are. No, the outdoors doesn't. That's one of the amazing and beautiful things about being out there. Unfortunately, there are people who do. And those people are also outside. So, and unfortunately, not everybody, there are many, a huge, section of the population of this country that doesn't have access to safe and quality green spaces. a huge number of people that, because of this racism and bigotry, don't feel safe outdoors, even if they have the access to go out on that trail. So, that's, I think, some of our biggest challenges that we're trying to work on now is what kind of policies do we ask the federal government to install, to push forward that will help alleviate that and fix those problems. And also, what kind of advocacy and awareness do we need to raise amongst the hiking community to create a more welcoming and safe place, in addition to, of course, the ongoing challenge of all of the trail maintenance that needs to happen, and making sure that trails and natural spaces and public lands from local to federal are well protected.
Wow, like, it seems like you guys have got a lot on your hands there. Say, like, obviously maintaining the trails to make sure they're safe, but also to make sure it's a safe space with, say, the environment and the community and the individuals that are, say, participating in the hiking as well. So yeah, it's super important to, say, make sure that everybody does feel welcomed, and yeah, like a sense of community, which I'd love to talk about in a moment too. So I just want to go back a step, Kate, and talk about, say, the COVID impact that you mentioned a moment ago. So what sort of impact have you seen on, say, hiking since the COVID?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's kind of a layered thing. So there have been studies that came out. I think the Rails to Trails Conservancy did one, and I know the Outdoor Industry Association also put out some reports that are showing that trail usage has gone way up, especially in urban areas during the pandemic, and also that the demographics of I want to say it was new trail users skews towards women of color and in urban areas, which is really interesting and awesome to see. So I think that it's great to have the data. You need the data, but also, like, it's kind of intuitive, right? That, like, during the pandemic, during the height of the pandemic, when folks couldn't travel very much, right? You couldn't really go very far. It wasn't good to travel very far because you didn't want a community spread. It was before vaccines and all of that. People were going outside and just finding the outdoor spaces close to home and finding a lot of solace in that, and finding kind of healing and like even more than your well, also, like, a lot of gyms were closed, right? So this was like a physical health, mental health, and emotional, spiritual health, all of that. Everyone was finding the outside. So it's awesome because, I have heard people say, or I've had interviews where they kind of want me to say, well, with more people out there, isn't that going to be like more wear and tear on everything? And isn't everything going to get crowded? And my argument is no, I actually think it's awesome. The more people that love the outdoors and love the trail, the more people there are advocating to protect it and make it a better place. And the broader diversity of identities that feel safe outside and are out there means that even more people will feel safe because they can find community with people that share that identity and make them feel safe and welcome out on the trail. So I say it's only an amazing and awesome thing. At the same time, during the pandemic, when a lot of us, so a lot of trail work that happens even on federal public lands happens mostly through volunteers, right? It isn't the federal government employees that are out there doing it. It's volunteers working with the federal partners, of course. But we haven't been able to, many organizations that field volunteer crews haven't been able to really field those crews as much safely during the pandemic. We're luckily ramping up back to full speed this year because of the adult vaccinations, right? I still have 2 kids under 5, so we're still waiting in our house for that round to hit. But so because we couldn't field volunteers, it meant that a lot of more people were using the trail, right? A lot of people out there, but not the maintenance and work being done on them and the cleanup and all of that. So the trails were getting heavily used and not getting the love they needed. So I think it's going to be a lot of work now for these volunteer crews to go out there and kind of get the trails back into shape. And so I guess my big call for anybody out there on the trail is one way that you can help, even if you don't have to like know how to do trail work or build irrigation or lift heavy tools or whatever. Just bring a trash bag every time you go out for a walk. Just try to get that in your in your memory, in your habit. Just bring a trash bag, clean up as you go, and leave the trail better than you found it every time.
Wow, okay. I really like what you said about the more people that use it, the better it is for the trails, because the people that do use it, obviously they want to use the trails. So why wouldn't you say want to then keep it in its best condition to make sure it's safe for you and for others too? So yeah, I totally agree with what you said there about the more people, the better. And yeah, I really liked what you said about it could be something so simple as taking a trash bag and just picking up any litter that you may come across and then chuck it in a bin. Because again, that way it keeps the place clean. It saves anybody, say, potentially falling over or getting hurt along the way. And it just keeps the world a better place too. So no, that's so nice that you mentioned that too. So I want to move on to something that I heard you mention now about the benefits of, say, hiking and maybe physical, mental, because obviously it does benefit so much for, say, one's mental health. Like for me personally, that someone that has, say, suffered from mental health, not only do I find getting out in the open and in nature really, really helps me, or did help me, and it still does help me now. I feel like being surrounded by like-minded people, being able to feel as if you're, say, in a community again of like-minded people, and surrounding yourself with those individuals that are going to have an amazing conversation about things that you actually enjoy. So the power of a conversation can literally save lives as well. So could you talk to us a little bit about, say, the positives of hiking?
Yeah, of course. And I think that emphasis on mental health is so important, right? And I love that we're all talking so much more openly about mental health and treating it like any other health issue that we might have, right? I have anxiety too myself, so so I know how that goes, and I think there's kind of like two ways that being outside and just like going for a walk in nature, that kind of low pressure, just going for a hike, or if you want to call it going for a walk, if that feels lower pressure, call it that. It's still a hike. If I could wink, I would wink, but I actually can't. This is a really weird lack of ability that I have, that my 4-year-old makes fun of me about. But I think there are kind of two ways, right? Which is there is something that can be, if you feel safe enough to do it, that can feel very healing and empowering if you're going through a rough time. And I've done this myself, to go out and hike by yourself, right? And just get that space for yourself, go at the pace you want to go, stop and take the photos you want to take. And just, it's all, you're in complete control of your experience out there. And also feels, and I don't know if this is especially because I'm a woman, so it especially felt that way to me. I don't know like how it would land with like everybody else, but felt very, as cheesy as it sounds, very empowering for me to go out there and purposefully go by myself. At the same time, you are absolutely right that building a sense of community is also really incredible and so healing, and it's also amazing how sometimes if you're feeling pretty awful, like for me, if I'm like feeling really anxious, I'm like, I don't want to see anybody, but I'm naturally an extrovert, right? But I'll be like, I don't want to see anybody. I don't want to go out there. I'm feeling too anxious. But then as soon as I'm with people, I feel okay again. It's like, I didn't want to do it, but once I'm there, I feel good again. And especially outdoors I don't know what it is about being outside, but something about fresh air, and even if you don't have the sun, even if it's drizzly or whatever, but just like it is today for me, but like fresh air and birds and whatever it is, but something about that is re-energizing to yourself. And I think you kind of alluded to this, Ryan, that like when you're out there with others on the trail, even if you're not talking about hiking, like it doesn't have to be like we love to hike, so we're going to geek out about hiking the whole time. Like you could be talking about anything, but the conversation is very different when you're outside walking along a trail than it is if you're sitting in a bar or you're sitting at home on your couch or you're on the phone or on Zoom or whatever, right? There's something really different about it. And I feel like I've had like far deeper conversations with friends and family and people I love when we're out walking on the trail. Something about it feels safe emotionally than I've had if we're sitting, indoors somewhere or at a restaurant or whatever. There's something about being out there that makes you feel like, at least for me, safer and like you can open up more. So I think part of why like we build such great community when we're out there on the trail and hiking together is like you have adventures together, you're having an experience together, and that builds these bonds in a way that like being at a party together doesn't build that bond.
Yeah, Kate, I really connected with what you said there about the difference between, say, being out on a hike with somebody than, say, being at a party. Like we've all been there. We've been at parties where we don't really want to be there, but we're there just because of the sake of it. And we may say have a drink. It could be alcoholic in your hand, and you're like, well, yeah, it's fun, but it's not that great. But then you're out in the fresh air, in the nature, and you're hiking. For instance, let's say like I've done some hikes before, climbed mountains for the sunrise, so early morning. So you're all gathered at the meeting point in the morning and like you're all pumped, ready to go because you're all going in the same direction. And yeah, like it will be hard to say struggle up the mountain in the morning maybe. It's cold, it's windy, it's dark. But then you get there, then you get to the top, and just as the sun's coming up, you're all sat there and it's just dead silence. And it's just like the most peaceful bliss experience that you'll ever experience. Like that's for me personally.
Yeah.
And oh my God, like it's almost unexplainable. Like until you've actually sort of done it or experienced it yourself, you won't really truly know. So yeah,
you
I
never
feel like,
forget it. You forget the parties, but you never forget those experiences.
exactly that. So Kate, I'd like to ask you then, what is your vision for the future?
Wow, our vision for the future. I mean, I could just read you the vision statement from our website, but but I won't be that lame. The vision is that that everybody, that no matter your identity, you feel safe to be outdoors, that that you don't feel any kind of shame in or embarrassment in or the way that you are outside and want to be outside, that you don't feel pressure to experience the outdoors in any specific way, right? That if you want to go sit under a tree and read a book, you can do that. Like you do not have to be doing a 10-mile trail run, right? And so just, that everybody kind of, feels that everybody is able to experience the kinds of things that you and I were talking about the kind of, those euphoric moments, like you talked about with the sunrise, or just those moments of feeling yourself feel calmer and more centered just by like moving through space outside. And that these places are protected and maintained, that we have so much work to do on everything that we need to do with indigenous cultures, because these public lands from local to federal are, pretty much all stolen lands, right? And there are indigenous peoples that have been stewarding these lands for thousands of years, right? And so there is a lot of work to be done on building relationship there, on working in community and in concert together, and on respecting those that long running, far preceding the culture we have now, stewardship of those places, right? So there's a lot of work to be done there. So I'd love to see that have come to fruition in better recognition there and better respect. And then I would also just love to see more people have access to green space and trails. Where I'm really lucky where I live now. It's in Piscataway land in suburban Maryland. So DC suburbs in Maryland in Montgomery County. And Montgomery County invests a lot in trails and parks and everything, right? So when you live in Montgomery County, chances are pretty high you live close to a trail, which is really awesome. It's one of the reasons why we love living here and why we kind of chose, of all the places around DC to live, this is where we chose to live. I would love to see that for more parts of the country. So that was a long-winded. It's a lot to that vision. There's a lot of work to do, basically. There's a lot of work to do, but it's all in a positive direction.
That's amazing, Kate. And thank you so much for sharing that with us. So for anybody, say, that's listening, what can somebody do to help, and what action steps can they take to be a part of the solution?
Yeah. So, there's always multiple levels to that answer. So I would say the number one thing that I would ask of folks is to make sure that you are welcoming to all identities out on the trail, that you are respectful of all identities, and welcoming, that you kind of educate yourself on what that means and avoiding microaggressions, that kind of thing. And then secondly, I would say, if you can remember, get it in your habit to, every time you go out for a walk, bring a trash bag. That would be awesome. So that would be the kind of minimum thing, right? To do those two things. But even then, and I don't mean to say that in a negative way, like that's awesome. If you do that, you're doing amazing things, and you are leaving the trail better than you found it, both from a people perspective and from a physical perspective, right? But also if you sign up for American Hiking's newsletter, so just go on our website. You can sign up anywhere, or donate. That would be great. Like, any amount you can give, we love and we appreciate it, and we use it for our programs and to do everything we do. But if you sign up for our newsletter, then you'll get you'll get all kinds of things, education on what it means to be welcoming, inclusive in the outdoors. You will get notice right away of our calls to action. So if we're like, hey, we need to get this bill passed, help us get it passed by writing to your senator, you can sign up, and those kinds of things are super easy to do on our website. Like, we connect you to the right people. All you need is your name and zip code, and like, you're good to go. So following those calls to action, taking part in National Trails Day and really using it as a day of service, June 4th this year. If you want to organize an event, like for your friends and everything, anybody can organize an event. It's free to organize an event. And we send you all the toolkits you need to figure out how to do that. So you just register your event on our website. So that would be great. And then follow us on social media. We will keep you informed about all of the latest things going on, and how you can help and what you can do. And we'll also, show you a lot of other groups to follow as well. So, groups that focus, say, on Black women hiking, or that focus on disability in the outdoors, or whatever. So we like to make sure on our social media to share kind of what everybody is doing. And so we'll make sure to connect you with those groups too.
Kate, thank you so much. And for you listening today, if you've enjoyed this episode, please press subscribe on YouTube or in your podcast app, because that will show the algorithms that this is an important conversation, so more people can learn the benefits of creating and sharing hiking experiences.